Hello, my name is Tara Brabazon and I have the great pleasure of speaking with
Steve Redhead.
And we're talking with Steve about his new book, Football and Accelerated Culture, This Modern Sporting Life. Now Steve, in this book you have a chapter, and it's a complicated phrase, quite difficult to say, but you have a chapter on sporting Claustropolis.
I have.
Now, what does that phrase mean, and why have you dedicated an entire chapter in a book to this concept, trope, theory, idea?
I think it's central to the book in many ways. It's actually the last chapter in the book. And basically Claustropolis comes from the theorist Paul Virilio, who said that Claustropolis is replacing Cosmopolis, in a very pregnant phrase, I think. And I took that and developed it into really my concept and theory of claustropolitanism, which is a suggestion that we all feel like we're jumping off the planet in this post-crash cultural condition. It's a structure of feeling, as Raymond Williams once said, but I think it actually captures where we are now in contemporary times. But I think sporting Claustropolis is very specific. What I've tried to capture there is, for example, we're talking at the moment about FIFA and Sepp Blatter and corruption. Indeed. I've tried to capture the way in which the global free market in sport has actually created a cultural condition. Wow. And the private fiefdom, which is FIFA, and all of the legal and criminological problems that that has created over decades, is actually a very good example of that. But you can see it in the doping scandal in AFL and rugby league in Australia, for example. Essendon, a great example. The appeal by WADA, World Anti-Doping Authority, to the Court of Arbitration in Sport, is a very good example of that, trying to actually re-regulate this sport in Claustropolis. I think that events, mega events like World Cups and Olympics and so on, are very good examples of sporting Claustropolis too, and I talk about them in the book particularly. And I think why they're important is because at one time those sorts of events were seen as regenerating cities through popular culture and sport. I don't think that's true anymore, if it ever was. And I think the Claustropolitan example is a very good one. If you look at the way in which, say, Russia and Qatar got their World Cup bids, or indeed in the sort of political protests over the World Cup, which has just passed in Brazil, you're not talking about the great days of the Sydney Olympics, for example, or the Barcelona Olympics. No. We've moved on a great deal from that. I think there was always a claustropolitan side to those events anyway. But I think sporting Claustropolis actually, as a concept, captures some of the problems that we have in trying to study mega events in sport and popular culture.
I agree, and I suppose what I find most interesting in your work, and for the scholars and the audiences who may be watching this vodcast, this isn't just a question of sport. I think in cultural studies and media studies in particular, we've all had a tendency to put sport and leisure cultures to one side, an example of something, a minoritarian example. I think what's important is you are using sport as a way to move humanities and social science scholarship forward. It's not an example, it's something a lot more than that. So I think that's terrific.